Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. We've got a different combination here tonight. You might see Ryan, but not that Ryan. It's the other Ryan. It's Ryan Sylvia with that Ethan Stone just off air. I mean, Shumpert wouldn't like it at all, but there was a lot of smoke surrounding which Ryan we prefer here on this very program. And Ethan, he didn't hold back in terms of where he stood, and the fact that he's on this version of Vols Hoops Hour and not this week's Vols Sports Guys speaks volumes. Ethan Stone, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I couldn't handle more of Shump. I had to delay it two days, and no, of course not. I was unavailable on Monday, so I'm happy to be getting on talking some Vols hoops, Lady Vols hoops on this Wednesday night. College basketball in the background. It's a great day.
There you go. It is. And look, he's all happy with the Bears stuff. It's off season. Ethan's optimistic right now. Ethan's feeling good.
I don't have to watch the Bears play football. It's amazing.
You don't for a while. You just get to talk yourself into Ben Johnson. It's great. Exactly. Ryan Sylvia of volreport.com also here. Ryan, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing good. I don't have to watch the Titans play football, so in the same boat there of enjoying the off season. But right now, I mean, quick Titans talk. Just feels like, as a very non-NFL expert, just very tune in on Sunday, watch my Titans lose and tune out. It feels like there is absolutely no right thing to do with the first, like the worst year ever to have the first pick, it feels like. So I guess it could be better in that department, but you'll never complain about the number one pick. So,
well, as someone who also had the number one pick of a team that I very much like and watch very often, the Atlanta Hawks having the number one pick in the worst draft to have the number one pick in of all time, in between Victor Wembanyama and Cooper Flagg. It's great stuff. It's just chef's kiss in terms of the lottery gods. So I've been there, Mr. Sylvia. I know what it's like.
They freed my guy DeAndre Hunter though, so I'm excited about that.
I mean, no, you don't make me go down this rabbit hole. I'm very much glad to be off the DeAndre Hunter. The theoretical DeAndre Hunter is what he will always be referred to as, because theoretically, good player. Here's the problem. It's never going to happen. And you traded up for him. Like, you traded up for DeAndre Hunter, and solid player, but can't stay healthy, will never stay healthy. And I was ready to get off that bus, and we'll see what Zachary Riza looks like over the long haul. But yeah, no, that was a long time coming. And the Hawks just usually let guys go, and his contract was up for 2 more years. So I think it's a good deal for the Cavs, but there's so many Vols fans who are like, what is happening on this to the start of this program? But look, they had to do that, and the Hawks had to get a little bit younger and had to make some room for Riza, and that's that. But they usually they would ride it out with Kevin Huerter and John Collins, and now Clint Capella is just going to ride out. They never traded him. So it's just, they do the most frustrating thing possible. Is just they ride these guys out and then they just let them go for nothing. So the fact they actually moved DeAndre Hunter and Bogey, the deadline was pretty wild. But that's the Hawks talk, the Hawks Minute here on this edition of the program. I'm sure there's some crossover between Hawks fans, and we definitely have Titans fans who listen. So
sure.
That's more than fine. Now that we have a couple days removed from the Vols comeback win over Vanderbilt, Ethan Stone, where are you at right now with the Tennessee Volunteers and what you took away from that second half surge?
I feel like I'm at a better place, whether or not I'm content with how Tennessee's playing right now than a lot of Vols fans are. I mean, Tennessee's February, apart from the Kentucky game, has been their best month of the season, probably, except for obviously non-conference when they're playing Louisville and Baylor. But right now, I feel like they're playing really well, and the problem, which has been the problem for a Barnes team for a pretty decent time now, I feel like especially lately has been the start of games. Obviously, Tennessee goes down 16, 15 points to Vanderbilt. And you just feel like, I mean, is Tennessee just going to do this forever? Are they going to do this into conference championship week? Are they going to do this into the tournament? And there's nothing saying that they're going to change that. However, the way they've been playing, I mean, they come back. They looked excellent in that second half against Vanderbilt. They played a great game against Missouri. Honestly, I don't think they played too bad against Kentucky. Kentucky just made their shots both times Tennessee played them. So in that case, I guess I tend to shy away from the panic button like a lot of people are. I don't really think panic is worthy of what we've been watching, considering Tennessee's in the fight for the 1 seed right now. But still, people kind of want to be nervous about, I feel like, how Tennessee can go into March and whether or not this is going to be a second round exit, a first round exit, or another trip to the Elite Eight. I think there's a lot of hurdles that Tennessee has to jump, and I think there's a lot of good challenges coming up. You got Alabama in a couple weeks at home, a team that plays a lot like Kentucky, a lot like Florida, a lot these fast teams that can shoot the ball really well. It's another chance to prove, hey, can we turn around? Can you turn that around? You're playing Texas A&M, who we're going to talk about more in just a little bit. This is a Buzz Williams team that has beat Tennessee 2 years in a row, that is physical, that plays really tough. And on top of all of that, you got to go to College Station and play them. This is the type of stuff that you prove. You say, we can batten down the hatches, we can play the foul game with you, we can bang a little bit in the trenches, and we can still come out with a win. That's what I'm interested most in, I feel like, coming into this game. And I feel pretty good about it. I think Tennessee's at a good place right now. I don't think they're in a perfect place, but I think there's a lot to build on. I think they can certainly do it. That's where I sit right now.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think when you look at A&M and Alabama in particular, because I think to get a 1 seed, I think they need to be 4-1 down the stretch here. And I think that's doable with the schedule. When you look at the rest of the league and the other teams fighting for a number 1 seed, that's what I think is actually kind of sneaky in Tennessee's favor, Ryan, is that Tennessee's, like, you already have heard from Lunardi and company, like, they're still in the thick of things. Like, they're right there. And the fact that they get Alabama still and play an A&M team that got waxed by Mississippi State, I think there's some vulnerability where if you just split that and then win everything else down the stretch, which is very doable for Tennessee, I think they're in a very good position to get that last 1 seed, especially if the Bama game is the one you win. Even if you lose at A&M, I think you're still in a really good spot to get a 1 seed right now, which is pretty wild based on what we've seen here for a lot of conference play, just the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this team.
Yeah, and it kind of just, like, it speaks to where college basketball is at the top of the league right now. Like, you have the Auburns and you have some teams at the top that are, pretty much confirmed on that one line. But there's kind of what I think they said, like 7 teams that they could see realistically being a 1 seed right now, and Tennessee's in that mix. And it does feel like it's just like you have one more game you can mess up with. You have one more game you can decide you don't want to show up for 10 minutes and you lose. And if you can avoid that in all the other games, and ideally probably if you had to pick a game to lose, I think it's this upcoming one against A&M, and then you would go and you would beat Alabama at home, just because that could be the difference right there, is that head-to-head if it became a situation between Tennessee and Alabama. But it does feel like they have one more game you can mess up with, and it feels the same with the Lady Vols too. Like, it feels like the Lady Vols, not in getting a 1 seed obviously, but in terms of being in that top 16 and getting a 4 seed and hosting, they can probably lose one more game. They can either lose Alabama on Thursday or they can lose Kentucky. You can't lose both of them, but if you just lose one of them, I think you're probably still in a good spot. You might need a little bit of help, but the margin for error, it's thin, but it's not minuscule yet, I guess. You still have that one game to fall back on.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. I think you don't want to drop any of these games. It'd be awesome to go 5-0, but like, I do think at A&M, and to Ethan's point, that has not gone well the last 2 years. For whatever reason, they just, especially last year, was brutal. What happened on the glass, and now you have way less size than you had a year ago going into A&M. I feel like for Tennessee to beat Bama, it has to go like Mizzou when they were here. Like, I think it has to be that kind of game where I don't think you're gonna be able to take Bama into the Auburn just 42-39 type game. Like, you're not going to be able to win the game that way. I think to beat Alabama, you're going to have to shoot the ball well. Chaz's going to have to shoot well. Zakai's going to have to shoot well like he did in the second half. The Vandy game, like, I just don't think there's a way around it. I think there's going to be a math problem if Tennessee does not play Alabama the way they played Mizzou. But I think for A&M, the path is what you did at Auburn a month ago, right? Like, that's really what you want to do, is you're just like, can we... Because they foul and they go to, like, both teams are going to draw fouls is my gut. And if you can just live in the free throw line, live in the bonus, that's how you drag A&M to just the absolute mud. Because I think that's what you're going to have to do with the amount of size that they have and the way A&M plays. I think your hope is you're just going to get killed in the glass if you play that, if you let them dominate that way. The way around that is you got to just muck this up as much as humanly possible and keep this as low scoring as humanly possible. And I think that's possible. I just said possible way too many times in that sentence, but I think that is possible, Ethan.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I had two things I wanted to talk about as far as very closely related to Tennessee's success heading into this game. And what you said perfectly encapsulates one of them. This has to be a disgusting basketball game, especially considering, like I said earlier, you got to go to College Station to do it.
Not disgusting like what we saw Saturday, by the way, in the first half against Vandy. Not that kind of disgusting. Good disgusting. There's two very different Tennessees. Tennessee's first half against Vanderbilt was bad disgusting. It's a there's two different types, so we have to clarify.
Yeah, and I don't think that necessarily means just play the hack-a-shack game either, because a thing that you want a fine line between that, because at the same time, Tennessee's front court depth isn't fantastic right now, and Texas A&M, especially with Pharrell Payne, Henry Coleman, the guys down low, they're the guys that draw a lot of those fouls. They work from the inside out. That's Texas A&M's bread and butter. They're going to get the rebound. They're going to limit your possessions, and they're going to beat you up. And Tennessee can't just fall into the trap of getting Igor and Felix with 2 or 3 fouls both in the first 20 minutes of the game, and then just having to slog out there while they dominate in the paint. The second part I was going to go over in conjunction with that, because I still think this has to be a disgusting game. A way you can kind of get away from that is make your threes, because A&M is going to let you have the threes. They're going to let you shoot. Because like I said, they prioritize inside. They don't want you to get to the hoop. They are going to force you baseline. They're going to force everything is going to be difficult trying to make you score inside. So they're just going to let you have the threes. And if you can hit them, that's how you beat them. Every team that's beaten, not every team. I think Oregon didn't play too well from 3 against Texas A&M. Every other team that beats them, they shoot 33% or more. Kentucky, I think Mississippi State shot 40% in this last game. You got to hit the outside 3, or else we'll have a 53 to 51 game like that Auburn one, and it'll just be a coin flip, for lack of a better word, because A&M they. Something else that's kind of interesting is they haven't played a defense really even close to Tennessee's this season. They still have yet to play Florida. They've yet to play Auburn. I think Mississippi's might be the best defense they've played, and that's a different level compared to what Tennessee's been doing this season. So
Diet Tennessee,
I think that in general might frazzle them a little bit, but they have the advantage because they're at home. They have the crowd at their back, and they might not be as deterred by that. So there's definitely a lot of matchups, I guess, going into this one that it's going to be a complex game. I don't think necessarily one thing's going to do it, but you got to have a lot of things go right.
Do you agree, Ryan?
Yeah, and I think that if there's a game where you want to get it into the mud and you want to get that good type of disgusting, A&M's not a bad opponent to do it to. I mean, they're a weird team. They're obviously one of the best teams in the country. They're on track to be a 2 or a 3 seed, but they're worse than the SEC in field goal and 3-point percentage. And it's just kind of a weird thing that they've been able to win so many games while shooting the ball so poorly. And I think Tennessee fans are listening and saying, yeah, that sounds familiar. Tennessee's not necessarily at the top of the SEC in field goal or 3-point percentage, and they found ways to win. But you look at guys like Wade Taylor and Phelps, and those are the 2 leading scorers, and neither of them are efficient either. I think both of them are in the 30% somethings from the field. So if you want to beat Texas A&M and you want to do it by playing like you did at Auburn, I think there is a path there, but Tennessee was the game at Auburn if they get just 1 more step, 2 more steps on offense. And that's where Ethan was alluding to. You're going to have to hit your threes. You're going to have Chaz Lanier. When he does get some open looks, he's going to have to knock them down. You're going to need not a Zakai game like we saw against Vanderbilt in the second half, but a more efficient Zakai game than we've also seen in the past, where he comes out and he shoots 1 for 8 from 3. And sometimes that's also part of, maybe you're not getting anything from Igor or Chaz, and Zakai feels like he needs to take over. But that's just to say the defense is going to have to show up like usual, but they are going to have to hit some shots, and someone's going to have to step up, whether that's Jordan Gainey, Zakai, Igor. You can get it from multiple guys, but someone's going to have to do it.
Or D-Stone just owns the state of Texas. That's the best case scenario. D-Stone's just, his 2 iconic games are in Austin and in College Station. It's the D-Stone Texas tour. Who says no?
D-Stone has one more All-Star game in him, and he's going to use it against Texas A&M.
That would be fantastic. I'm here for it.
It would make a lot of sense.
Well, it would make a lot of sense because it doesn't make any sense because D-Stone,
exactly.
It's been rough of late. So that he just comes out of nowhere and just guns blazing here in College Station would be wild. He's going to get some looks, and he's okay with firing. Like, that's the thing is D-Stone's going to fire. So, I mean, Tennessee does not have a lot of guys who, I mean, that was the most frustrating thing about the Zakai thing in the first half on Saturday is that Tennessee does not have the luxury of Zakai not shooting. And like we can debate like what kind of shooter Zakai ultimately is. Like I've compared him a lot to Trey, not to make everything about the Hawks in this podcast, but you know how much of a ball watcher folks are when they talk about Trey Young, where it's like, oh, great shooter. It's like, nope. Not a great shooter. I've watched a lot of Trey Young threes in my life. Trey Young's not a great shooter. Trey is an unbelievable passer. He has an unbelievable floater. He is unbelievable at drawing contact and knowing, like, there's a lot of things that Trey Young is very, very good at. But he is not an elite shooter. He does not have Steph Curry touch. He's never been an above average 3-point shooter with high volume. That's okay because he's really good at other stuff. That's how I am with Zakai, where it's like you still have to get those shots up. Like he's going to have nights where he goes 5 for 5 from 3 because I think he is going to be kind of up and down with his threes. And I don't even think he takes a lot of bad threes. Like I think his shot diet's pretty okay for me because it's usually either right at the rim or it's a 3. And usually they're pretty open. Like Zakai does a good job of getting good looks for Tennessee from deep for the most part, but he just can't. That was the weird part about Saturday and why he came out and they were talking about like what Barnes said to you and stuff because it's like it was so strange. It's like you have guys where Felix Akpara is not going to be putting up shots from deep. Cade Phillips obviously not. Boswell's not a factor right now. Gainey's not shooting well from 3. He's doing everything else well, but the Gainey 3-point stuff is just very strange in terms of his variance from deep because he's missing some good looks, but he's been really good at the elbow. He's doing everything else well, which helps Tennessee a lot. But for whatever reason, the threes aren't falling. Meshack, obviously, no one's going near him on threes for the most part. And it's just like it's a math game. Like part of it, I harp on this a lot, but modern basketball is just that like, it's like, you have to shoot threes. There's just no way around it. Like this team doesn't have enough shooting. And if teams like Vanderbilt are shooting really well from deep, even if you're playing pretty good defense, you have to start shooting. Like, I know you want to be a pass-first guy, but those shots have to go up, and that might be another case on Saturday where if Wade Taylor starts off hot or A&M get built to lead because Tennessee has a slow start, it's like, Sakai, you can't let this get it out of control, so you're going to have to start being more aggressive shooting the basketball. It's just part of where Tennessee's at in terms of their depth and just what they need, right? I think that's fair.
Is that... I actually didn't hear what it was that Barnes told Zakai. Do you know what exactly he said to him? Because I had heard about that, but I don't remember what he said to him.
Well, like Zakai joked that he couldn't say like on the broadcast. Remember, like Zakai like came out and was like, "I can't." Like it was uncharacteristic. I think of. I mean, it was. I don't think it was happy. I don't think Barnes was happy about the first half from Zakai, and obviously because it was different. It was something that we did not see, and Zakai was a completely different player in the second half, and the main reason Tennessee came back and beat Vanderbilt in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it'd be perfect for Tennessee to say, look, we want Zakai to be like that all the time. But, yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's just kind of his nature. Zakai is always going to be good as a floor general. He is sometimes going to be elite from range, and sometimes he's going to kind of throw a bit of a dud, but that's fine. You just kind of have to roll with that. And what you said, Chase, I think is really interesting, especially with the Gainey weirdness from 3. It's funny you bring that up because I was thinking that as well. It's so like if you looked at Jordan Gainey's 3-point numbers versus Igor's, it would blow your mind. It would absolutely blow your mind. At the start of the season, Jordan is shooting well, Igor's not shooting well, and then they just completely flipped. I mean, Igor's shooting out of his mind right now, and Jordan can't find water if he fell off a boat.
But he can from the elbow. Like it's just it's just threes.
Exactly. I just like you said, that's not to say that Gainey's not doing anything. I think Tennessee is at their very best when Jordan Gainey is playing to his potential, and that kind of piggybacks off what you're saying with Zakai. Like everyone has their own little roles here, and Zakai's is kind of in a certain sense to be a bit of a wild card because when he's playing very, very well, Tennessee's tough to beat. When he's playing really, really bad, Tennessee is going to lose. They're going to. He played terrible against Florida, and that was Tennessee's worst game of the year. Obviously, the next time around against Florida kind of kind of contradicts that. But obviously, when Zakai's not
Gainey
playing
steps
well,
up, man. When Zakai's not around, Jordan
Yeah.
Gainey is like, this is my Super Bowl. Like
And
Jordan Gainey is Tom Brady when Zakai's out. He's just
that's
like, this is my moment, man.
that's true to an extent. I think when it is pre-planned and when
Yeah.
Barnes goes into it, not necessarily saying, look, Zakai's not here, but when he goes into it, especially as of late, I feel like Barnes has been like, look, you showed me something in that Florida game. We know you can do it. I think you and Brian Shumpert talked about this a little bit ago. Like, give him the ball more, let him run the show more. And it's not like Tennessee's just going to fall apart without Sakai, but I also do feel like Gainey has a little bit of that nature too. Look, if he's struggling, he's not going to be able to pick it up in the middle of the game. He seems like a guy that's kind of fueled on confidence. And kind of wrap my point up, because I've been going on for a while now, when Tennessee is playing within their roles like that, but there's one little guy like Zakai shooting crazy from three, or Gainey all of a sudden just taking over and dropping 23 points like he did against Illinois. That's when Tennessee's at their best, when they're kind of moving outside of their usual flow. And, recently they've been showing different ways of doing that. Igor's all of a sudden catching fire from three, and that was a massive help in the comeback against Vanderbilt. That was massive in Tennessee's win over Missouri, and I think it's going to be big moving forward too.
Igor's never missed a top of the key three. It's never happened. It's just never happened. And it's always when I think Igor has my favorite mix of any Tennessee player in a long time, because when Igor, it's net, but it's crisp. It's a great sound. As a swish connoisseur, let me say, Igor and his threes are fantastic. The sound that they make are one of one. Ryan, Sylvia, what do you think is the most important matchup to watch in this game for Tennessee against A&M?
They're gonna have to keep Anderson Garcia off the glass. I mean, I think he grabbed 17 last year in College Station, so it's easier said than done with the guy like him. He's back. He's leading the team in rebounding again. You have some different personnel there, though, this time. You have some different guys in the paint. We'll see what Tennessee can do with it. It feels like a game that you'll need Igor to step up. Like, Felix isn't the strongest rebounder in the world for his size, but Igor makes up for it in most games. So it feels like a game that you'll need Igor to get in there, get some rebounds. You'll need the minutes where Jemai Meshak's on the floor. Maybe you'll need him to grab a few. But to me, if you're looking at a specific matchup, just because of the nature that the two top scorers for Texas A&M have been scoring at, which is pretty inefficient, I look more towards the glass. You just can't get beat on the glass like you were last year, and then that probably sets you up to have one of those situations where, all right, everyone kind of sit in your roles. Is it going to be like, whose game is it going to be? Kind of what you guys were talking about. Like, it feels like almost any game you go into this season with Tennessee, a different player steps up and has a big game, and it's almost impossible to guess which one it's going to be. Is it going to be Zakai? Is it going to be Igor going for 20 points? Is Darlinstone going to have his Texas game again? Like, it could really be like 5-6 different players on any given night. So you get your rebounds, you play your defense, and then I think you just kind of hope that you get some good offense from a few guys and see what happens.
What about you, Ethan?
Yeah, I think he hit the nail on the head. I've used that twice now, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, I said possibly or probably.
It's a good one. It's one of my favorites. It's one of my go-tos. But yeah, I think he's exactly right. I think that keeping Garcia, because he's just a freak of nature. He's one of those guys. I kind of equate him a little bit to Cam Matthews with Mississippi State. I feel like they're kind of similar players, but obviously Garcia is a little more. He's one of the best rebounders in the country, definitely one of the best in the SEC, and he's just kind of the it factor. I feel like for them, like he's a hustle guy for them. He's their early season Zakai for us. He's the guy that'll go out there and just kind of do the little things right. On top of that, I'll add to it a little bit. My matchup is just Tennessee's front court versus A&M's front court. I'll just make it a little more simplified. I've talked a little bit about Payne already. Henry Coleman's not having his best season, but he's still a presence down there. He still has the experience, obviously, that he's had with he helped. I don't remember exactly what he did last time, but I know he had a good game last time Tennessee beat or Texas A&M beat Tennessee, and he's been on two teams that have beaten Tennessee. He's familiar with a Rick Barnes program. He's familiar with how Tennessee's going to want to go into this one. And I'd agree with what Ryan said about Igor. This feels like a game that he needs to, not necessarily from a scoring perspective, but just from a blocks and steals and rebounds, especially, and keeping away from fouling, kind of like alluding to what I said earlier. Tennessee will lose this game. If Felix and Igor have 2 fouls both in the first 20 minutes. I am positive of it. Because while, we said that a disgusting game favors Tennessee, which I truly believe it does, you can't go too far over. Because if you're in foul trouble against this team, you're going to lose. Because they are, for the most part, really, really, really good at drawing fouls. And not to mention, like I've said twice now, I feel like on this show, they're going to have the crowd at their back as well. So it's just going to be every little mistake. It's just going to be compounded on top of each other. And, if Tennessee has another really, really bad start and A&M doesn't, if A&M's up 10 points and we got the Vols in foul trouble and they're doing kind of whatever they want to down low. And it's, I just don't see a path to victory for this Tennessee team. I don't see a way that they can just kind of crawl back from this one like they did Vanderbilt, I guess.
Well, I think what's helpful, I don't know if you guys agree, but I do think this was a good time for Tennessee to get a week off. Like, I think they're banged up with Igor and Cade and other guys. I think this week off is going to be super helpful because they're going to need their bigs as healthy as possible against A&M on Saturday. I don't know if y'all agree, but I think this was actually really great timing for Tennessee to get a week off before going to College Station because if they had like a brutal, if you had somebody like, I don't know, if you had Vanderbilt on Tuesday or if you had to and then had to go to A&M on Saturday, I think I'd feel a little bit less optimistic, but because of this week off, I think this team kind of needed it. I think this could be one of those things where we come out and they have a lot more energy and maybe they get off to a better start because they've had more time to recover and rest and get ready because we haven't seen this kind of time off for them all year. And because you have such a thin rotation, I feel like they are more apt to take advantage of the time off than maybe some other teams that are a little bit deeper. Or am I overthinking this?
I think it's true. And I think, one, if you had to pick a time of the year to have a bye week like this, I think this is probably around it where you're not going into the SEC tournament cold or anything like that, but it is later in the year, so you're probably more banged up than you were even just a couple of weeks ago. And so having 5 games left, I think it's a appropriate time to have a bye week for just kind of getting your legs under you and then the health of some of the guys that are banged up. And then you also look at just kind of the gauntlet that they've been through and not even necessarily the teams that they've played, but you go from at Oklahoma, at Kentucky, you come back home to Vanderbilt and you play Vandy in Knoxville, but then you go right back on the road for 2 more road games. So it's not like they've been home much recently either. So I think it's probably pretty beneficial to just kind of catch your breath, kind of sandwiched in between those 2 road trips and get prepared for this A&M game. Obviously, they'll take the extra time to scout, and they got a good game to scout from with Mississippi State and another good program. So, and obviously you saw A&M lose that game too, so maybe you'll get a mad A&M. But it gave you a pretty recent game to scout from. Sometimes you see teams. I feel like Tennessee football is one of those teams that doesn't look great off of bye week. Sometimes maybe Tennessee basketball following that, but I think that if you could literally just look at the schedule and say, hey, when do we want a bye week? I think this is probably like the top 3 that you would choose for having a bye week in this spot.
I like it. Final thing here, as we get into the Lady Vols, they do not have the luxury of a bye week in the middle of their week, but things are good for Lady Vols, and I also think that might help is just kind of like the for the men's folks who've been watching both and everything else, like, oh, I can just focus on Lady Vols here in the middle of the week. So I think that will maybe be a sneaky important thing for the Lady Vols. But the biggest story this week for Kim Caldwell's team for you, Mr. Sylvia, is what?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Oh, what was the biggest story this week for Miss Caldwell's team?
Yeah, biggest story, I would have to say just Jewel Spear and what she's done. She's coming off of co-SEC Player of the Week, along with Michaela Blakes, who scored like 53 points for Vandy in an overtime win against Auburn. So it says a lot that Jewel Spear had a good enough week to even be co-Player of the Week with someone that's setting all the records you could think of across SEC play in Blakes. But Kim talked, I guess it was yesterday, about what has led to Jewel Spear reaching this form. It hasn't just been this last week. It feels like it's been 2 or 3 weeks in a row now that Jewel's kind of taken that next step here in her last season. And she talked about just kind of being comfortable, just kind of knowing where to be on the floor. And sometimes I thought this was kind of an interesting part. Like, sometimes the farther away you are from the ball in this system means the more open you are, because when you're running in transition like Tennessee does on offense, there's so much of a demand to stop the ball that if you just kind of leak off into the corner or something like that, then you will be more open. And so it's just little things like that that I think Jewel's getting more comfortable with, and it's getting her more open looks. And she's just been shooting at an absurd clip. But I think that also, like, you take a step back and you hear things like that about players still getting comfortable in the system. And it has to give you a lot of hope going forward that, like, this is their first year and they didn't have much time to implement everything. So when you get frustrated at, like, hey, the half court offense hasn't been where it needs to be, I don't think they've had enough time throughout the year in the offseason to kind of fully implement that. And so the progression that we've seen with the Lady Vols this season, I think, has to give you a lot of hope that, hey, you get another offseason next year, you have players returning that you can kind of build off of one season in the system with. It really kind of keeps that optimism going that this should keep climbing and getting better and better. And it's already off to a pretty good start. I mean, Kim Caldwell, top 15 coach for the Naismith Award watch list. So
pretty good for year one.
Yeah.
I think it's going to work out. Ethan, what about you?
Yeah, beat UConn year one. That's
that. I mean,
I don't really. Just, she could lose every other game. She beat
don't
UConn
do that.
Year one.
Don't do that.
That's going to win a lot of people, especially. And I'll be 100% honest. I've watched maybe 6 or 7 Lady Vols games this year. I've been kind of caught up with college football and other stuff, but I mean, like, let me tell you this much: it's a treat. It's so much fun watching this Tennessee Lady Vols team. They're a load of fun, and that UConn game, it was a blast. I mean, that's the most locked in I feel like I've been to a Tennessee women's game in quite some time. Obviously, Tennessee has kind of had this thing where I believe they did it against South Carolina. I want to think they did it earlier in the season against maybe Texas, where they're right in the game and they just can't quite finish. And then you go into the UConn game and you finish. Now, you got another interesting one coming up with Alabama. They're, I think, number 18, number 19 in the country right now. And I think something else that's interesting, one of the few things I do know about this Lady Vols team is they just released the top 16, and Tennessee and Alabama are going to be 2 of them that are kind of fighting in that arena for it to host. And obviously that's a massive deal in March and when it comes to the women's game. So with, we kind of, I think it's interesting that on the men's side, you have Tennessee and Alabama kind of fighting for that 1 seed. On the women's side, you've got them also fighting with a game upcoming for, the honor, I guess, of hosting. And obviously, like I've said before, that's a major deal. I believe Tennessee gets Alabama at home for this one, so that's obviously going to be a pretty big thing. The person I feel like I've been most interested watching lately, and I'd love to hear you guys' input on it because I just simply have not watched that much of her, is Z Spearman. It seems like she is insanely consistent across the past 5 games. She's hovering right around that 16, 18 point mark. I wonder how much of an impact she'll have on this one and how important it is for her to have a good game once again against a good Alabama team.
I think that's interesting that you brought up Z too, because that's another thing Kim talked about after their last win against Ole Miss, or maybe it was even the game before that too. I think she spoke on it after both games where it was like Z came in and she was inconsistent. She's found that consistency, right, in the last handful of games. And so what's kind of been the switch there? And for her, Kim talked about how it was kind of, I don't want to say the word selfish. I don't think Z was being selfish, but it was more maybe taking a team approach to it and really kind of finding your role in the system. And that's kind of the way that you'll get your buckets. And so we've seen that, I think, at the end of games too, fourth quarter, the other team's worn down, the other big's tired of running up and down the floor, and she's really taken advantage of those situations. And so yeah, I think she's been one of the bigger pieces for Tennessee this year. She'll get maybe less headlines than a Jewel Spear that is having a tear right now, than a Talasia Cooper who can take over any game, or a Ruby Whitehorn who can score in bunches as well. But really, like you said, recently it seems night in, night out, she's been good to not only score, but to play some good defense, protect the rim. She's probably at most schools a 4. She's pretty mobile, but she's being asked to play 5 at Tennessee. And I think she's done a really good job of kind of stepping up and accepting that challenge.
I love it. Ethan Stone, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Saturday Down South this week?
Yeah, we're gearing up for March Madness. Obviously, football is finished up. Saturday Down South is a football mostly site, but we're transitioning a little bit into college baseball, college softball, college basketball coming up. Obviously, when March is over, we'll have a lot of content on baseball on the softball side. We're kind of building pages right now. That's part of kind of my responsibilities at the moment. But yeah, just keep looking for the news for March Madness coming up for the SEC tournament. We'll have full coverage over there.
Love it. And yourself, Ryan, over at volreport.com, where people should be already subscribed. You've been coming on this pod weekly for a while now, and if you're not subscribed to volreport.com, what are you doing? Go ahead and do that today. But what can the good folks check out from you and Noah and the team over there at volreport.com this week?
Yeah, similar situation. Just kind of not only just crossover with softball and baseball and the men's women's basketball, but football never stops anywhere in the South, but especially in Knoxville. So we have all the coverage you need. Tennessee Athletics at volreport.com.
There you go. I love it. Keep up the great work, my friends, and I will talk to y'all again next week.
Appreciate it.
The Chase Thomas Podcast. For people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, hello. Welcome back. Chase Thomas Podcast, taping this on a Wednesday afternoon. We've got Cousin Shane of that SEC podcast here. What a great setup. You got the lights behind you. You got that SEC podcast logo. Is that who are the men behind you?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. We got Lane Kiffin on one side and Monty Kiffin on the other. So
there you go.
My grandfather actually collected those at the Smoky Stadiums when they would hand those out. And, and I've got some that I'm hiding that you can't see. Your Buzz Petersons and I think Butch Jones is floating around here somewhere. Okay. But yeah, I threw these up, especially after Monty passing. I felt like that would be the right move.
I love that. And he was a great dude. And
did you ever meet him?
My friend of the pod, Ryan Shumpert, did such a great job with his, I don't know if you read the oral history on the Lane Kiffin era at Tennessee on Rocky Top Insider from a month ago, I guess now, but it was so good. And you come away, Monty, just a great dude and great defensive mind. I would have loved to have Monty Kiffin calling Tennessee defenses for a while. That would have been fun.
Yeah. No, it felt like, man, I mean, it felt like we had something special back then too,
Yeah.
I mean, even though we lost that Alabama game, that Cody jumped up and got that block. It just, I felt like there were some special years ahead for the Tennessee Vols, and honestly, that probably crushed me. One of the most is when Kiffin, up and left and went to Southern Cal. That one stuck. So it took me a long time to get him out here. And if it weren't for his dad, I'd still have it in the box over there in the corner.
I love that. Who is your favorite Tennessee coach? Is it obviously Philip Fulmer, or do you have a different one?
Well, it's funny. I grew up a big Johnny Majors fan. And when you were younger, because that's back my time, I'm 42 years old, and Johnny Majors was my favorite coach because he was my grandfather's favorite coach. And he's the one that introduced me to football and took me to the orange and white games and just kind of made it special for me. And I remember, Heath Schuler back in the day, that was one of my favorite quarterbacks, but there was something special about Phil Fulmer. My grandfather never forgave him. I think even after that 98 championship, he finally came around. But honestly, I went to a Philip Fulmer offensive line camp, and I was sold when I met him for the first time. There was a real reason that I knew that Phil Fulmer was special with recruiting. He just made you feel welcome whenever you got to meet him. And so Fulmer moved up my list, but, Josh Heupel's moving up there pretty quick right now.
Yeah, I mean, right there. He's actually right with Fulmer in terms of win percentage to this point in his career. The thing is, though, he's got a long way to go. You look at the years. Fulmer was winning at a little bit better clip than Heupel has to this point, but it was over just a crazy amount of time where you just look at the years and it's just maybe Heupel's here that long, but the modern college football climate, I don't know if Heupel will be around long enough to catch Fulmer or to win at that clip that long.
And don't get me wrong. I was one of the ones that was ready for a new change when Fulmer is a tail end of his career. I was, you watch a Steve Spurrier offense and you're like, oh, why can't we have that with all the recruiting that we're able to do with the facility? Back then it was a facilities race and it felt like we were right there neck and neck with the best. And I didn't quite understand why we couldn't be as exciting as some of these other teams that were starting to hit in the early 2000s. So, but you know how it works. The decade, I think, was it Mark had that book, Decade of Dysfunction or whatever. It's you don't realize how good you have it until it's gone. And I look at some of these other teams around the SEC and I say the same, like Coach Kelly. You look at Brian Kelly down at LSU. they're upset. Like last year was a disappointment. A 9-win season was a disappointment. You pair that with a 10 and 11 win season prior to that. It's like, man, it could be worse, guys. Don't look at Florida. They still haven't got, above par, if you will. So I'm very grateful for what Josh Heupel has brought to Tennessee, and the consistency is harder than ever. And the fact that he's in a college football playoff year 3, year 4, whatever it is, I feel like that's a win. That's a feather in our cap, and I'd like for him to stick around for a long, long time.
Yeah, we'll see. I think this is a big year for Heupel. I think year 5 for him, it's really interesting because I think in a lot of ways it's kind of a fork in the road situation because Heupel doubled down on the offensive staff. Like, he did not make any changes. He was like, we're going to get it right. Joey Halsley staying at QB coach, Darrell Sims still at RB coach, Kelsey Pope still wide receiver coach, Alec Ablin still tight ends coach, Glenn Ellerby still offensive line coach. And he's betting on his in-house guys. Like, there's not even like a new co-OC. There's not a new big time analyst coming in. Like, he is betting on things getting just remedied naturally in-house. Yeah. He's betting on the retention of his guys because they've only added a handful of guys from the portal, 0 receivers, even with the mass exodus at wide receiver in the winter cycle. I think because you've invested so much in Nico coming in to have the kind of year that he had last year, it wasn't bad. And winning 10 games as a first-year starter is a big deal. I would say he was good from the second half of the Alabama game on. But this was still an offense that was shut out for a month straight in the first half. This was still an offense that was 94th in passing in conference play nationally last year. It's an offense that has not been good outside of running the football the last 2 years. So now you have half of the Heupel tenure with some, I would say, less than ideal circumstances at offense where you're having to live in 12 personnel this past year because your tackles can't block. So you're just like, we're running up the middle and we're making Dylan Sampson our Ron Dane, and we're running like 2005 Wisconsin style football to make the CFP. But on the flip side, I give Heupel credit for pivoting. Like, a lot of coaches are stubborn about that. Like, you covered the SEC as a whole, Shane. You've seen so many years of coaches who are so steadfast in their belief that their system will get over this.
Jimbo Fisher's a prime example.
Exactly. And Heupel adjusted. He was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes. We're going to lean on our defense, which was top 10 in scoring defense this past year, and I'm going to lead on my elite tailback in Dylan Sampson, and we'll see how far this takes us. And I mean, it took him to the CFP, so I think he deserves credit in that regard. But I also think this fan base and what you were talking about, like those fireworks, people can't forget the 2022 season. People can't forget that number 1 scoring offense. People can't forget that you've invested a lot of money in quarterbacks and you're stacking blue chip quarterback after blue chip quarterback. And at a certain point, like the passing game, the vertical passing game has to return, or I don't know what, like, I don't know. I just think he will not be able to sell running it back with everybody in 26 if the passing game it doesn't have to be as dominant as it was in 22 with Hyatt and company. Yeah. But you need to find a middle ground to what it was. You have to have new wrinkles. You have to make sure that it's showing significant signs of life, or then like, what did you get out of the Nico experience? Because the first year was the Dylan Sampson show. And if this year he's not on pace for a Heisman type year, then you're like, wow, okay. Then he's gone, and then you're like, what was that? Like, there was so much hype, and it was just, it was fine. Like, you'll probably win a lot of games, but you're like, it wasn't the most exciting.
I think that's the problem is we have a short-term memory, and we remember how special 22 was. And I mean, you think about some of the greatest football games, multiple ones of those that come to mind came from that year alone. I mean, it was special. And then when you see a defense take the step forward like they did last year, and you can't help but think, man, if we had the offense of 22, there's no way we would not be hoisting a national championship trophy at the end of the year. And why are we not there? We've got the coaching staff returning. You said it. We got the continuity there. We got a lot of pieces back on the defense. We got, I felt like last year this was going to, I mean, that's what we kept saying. We made excuses for Joe Milton. Like, you know what? I get it, and Hoppel too. I get it. Don't want to burn a red shirt, yada, yada, yada. We're going to keep him. The Nico will be released next year. We got a little teaser with the Iowa game and we got all excited. And then it kind of sputtered, man. I mean, after the NC State game, it just felt like we never had anything to work with downfield. And, ultimately, you could blame the staff. You could blame players. I see a lot of people blame, the wide receivers and, but, again, ultimately it comes down to the captain. And as the painted picture I gave you earlier, there's still expectations now when you go year after year, 10 wins, 11 wins, we're flirting. We're talking like this is when the details matter. This is when the players matter. And you can't go through a damn NIL transfer portal and not walk away with at least one or two guys that are key contributors. It seems like, and fix the problems that we were having. Because then it makes me think, well, maybe it's not the receivers, So I don't know, man. I get the frustration side of a Vol fan because we want it now. Yeah. And we don't want to keep referring to 90. We don't want to be the next Georgia that talks about a natty for 40 years. We want to be the team that is always competing for it. And it feels like we're close. We're close enough to make a difference and not get embarrassed like we did with Ohio State.
Yeah, I think they're high floor. Like Heupel is a high floor guy at Tennessee. And I think this season, like I still look at it, I'm like probably worst case it's 8-4, but I would say probably most realistic worst case is 9-3.
Yeah.
But he has to win one of 3 games he's never won before as the head coach at Tennessee, which is either beat Georgia or win on the road at Tuscaloosa or Gainesville. If he doesn't do one of those 3, Tennessee's not going to the CFP in 2025.
You don't think so? You don't think so?
I don't think 9-3 gets you in now.
9-3. I got you.
Yeah.
10-2, you're in.
10-2, you're in. Yeah. But to get 10-2, that means you have to win one of those games that Heupel's never won at Tennessee. So I don't know. Maybe this year he can do it. You get Florida in November. I think that could potentially be a big thing for them because there's some weird Florida optimism where people are really like driving this in, and I'm like, I think people just like, I'm seeing some of this national stuff and I feel like a homer sometimes where I'm seeing this and I'm like, Tennessee got to the CFP with for most of the conference play was a bad offense. Like they made it with underachieving with this offense and still made it to the CFP. If their offense is even halfway better vertically in 25, like I think they can get to 10-2 with relative ease again. But people who are putting Auburn or Florida or South Carolina ahead of Tennessee right now, I'm like, y'all, this defense, they're returning. Like, I understand they're going to lose Pierce, but like Joshua Joseph's in year 4, I think will be just fine. Him, Caleb Herring, Jordan Ross, they've got dudes. The linebacker play, I think, will be better. They're only going to be playing blue chippers there. You have the best cornerback tandem in Tennessee at Tennessee since Jabari Greer in the early 2000s. Like Dramad and Ricky Gibson are the best that Tennessee had. Boo Carter in year 2. The defense is going to be really good. Like I don't see the defense falling off at all in 25. So I'm like, I just feel like 9-3 is the floor for this team again. And I see these other, like, people are talking themselves into the other teams, and I don't know, Shane, are we homers for just not seeing it? Because I feel like people don't want to put Tennessee in the CFP again.
They're definitely not getting the respect they deserve. I mean, you got to remember, not too many teams made the playoffs last year. Tennessee was one of them, and honestly should have hosted that playoff game against Ohio State. And who knows, if we didn't get a face mask, maybe we would have won that game. I don't know. That's the optimism homer in me. But I will say this. We do this during talking season. We do it every year. We paint a picture of why this team's better than that team. South Carolina may have a better team, but their schedule is one of the toughest in the league. Auburn will show improvement, I believe, this year. Of course, I say that every year with Hugh Freeze down there. So Mike absolutely hates Hugh Freeze, and I just feel like, I don't know. I mean, you talk about somebody being aggressive in the portal. They were one of those teams, and that's why we're talking about them. So Florida will be improved. And, if I'm looking at Tennessee's schedule, This is your optimism. You talked about the toughest games. That's Georgia at home. That's Bama on the road. I think that's the toughest.
Yeah.
But you still got the swamp that you got to go to late in the year. You still got Arkansas, which, they got your number last season. So there's still some landmines that are laying around on that schedule. But if you were just doing schedules hardest to easiest, Tennessee really lucked out on this draw here. And you're right. If we've got some improvement on the offense, we keep the continuity and the aggressiveness on the defense. I think we're still right there in the same boat of taking one of those 12 spots at the end of the year.
My gut is the Florida game in November is a play-in game for Tennessee.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. That's Lane Kiffin. Yeah. I mean, the Florida Gators are and they're hot right now.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a joke, but they got the longest winning streak right now in the SEC because they finished the season strong. But again, very daunting schedule next year for the Florida Gators. And what does it look like by the time they roll in? Tennessee rolls in down there, and just following the Vols. We just did a podcast yesterday, Fear of the Logo. And basically when you see a logo, what's your knee-jerk reaction? Like if you see it on a schedule 4 years from now, we always have that moment where we're saying, well, that's a win or that's a loss or toss or something like that. And the Florida Gators will always be a toss, in my opinion, because the 90s. I mean, that's the reason I don't got any hair, man. Them damn Florida Gators have taken it all away from me, because there's plenty of games that we should have won, we could have won, and we didn't win. And I worry because, hell, last year, Florida blew that game. If you ask me, they blew it in Knoxville. Billy Napier just kind of screwed up there at the end. And the year before, I had lost a bet and had to walk 13 miles because some reason Tennessee lost to the Florida Gators and they shouldn't have. So that's the Gators for you. And so you can never take your foot off the gas here in the SEC. But I'm telling you right now, there's reason for optimism if you're a Vol fan, because you do have, I think, some of the pivotal pieces. You got a returning quarterback, the continuity. You may not like the coaching. Who cares? It's the same system. It's the same guys. So the expectations will always be the same. I think that's important. There's some new coaches out here trying to break in programs. You're going to watch. They're going to fumble right out of the gate. Tennessee can't afford to do that. And then you pair that with a really good defense. That's kind of erasing some of the mistakes you make on offense. Hopefully we take some more chances. I'd love to see some more chances. I called him low T Heupel at times. It felt like we were just afraid to be aggressive. I want to be a little bit more aggressive, and I think we can afford that because of our defense.
I think that's fair. A lot of it will just be like Lance Hurd's got to be a lot better at left tackle. Part of last year is just like I was talking about at the top of like the 12 personnel stuff. It's just that Tennessee could not protect. Like you saw in the Oklahoma game, Tennessee was just basically like, we got to get out of here. And Larry Johnson's in there. You were in your backup tackles and you're just like, survive in advance. Like, let's just get out of here and go home. But then you're like, oh, this is just going to be the rest of the season because the tackles aren't going to be able to protect Nico. Nico was running for his life for the majority of conference play. And you couldn't really get a good, fair read on him because he's a 19-year-old kid who is running for his life in the toughest conference in the sport, week in, week out. His receivers, when they are open, they're dropping balls. And then when they're, sometimes they are open and Nico doesn't see him in time, so Nico misses. Yeah. And then there are some times where it's the protection breaks down and Nico gets sacked or running for his life, whatever. But I do think David Sanders at right tackle as a plug-and-play guy, my gut is that raises the floor for Tennessee's offensive line because they don't even need elite tackle play to survive. Yeah. Like they were playing Gerald Mincey, J.J. Crawford on the left-hand side of the Alabama game, and it was fine. Like they were able to stop some NFL first-round edge guys against Alabama. If the tempo is rolling, doesn't matter. What they need is just solid. They need just okay. Like you need B+ B play at tackle at Tennessee under Heupel to make this work. And I think as a true freshman with the amount of talent that Sanders has, I think he can solidify that from where they were last year with Campbell and Dane Davis rotating. But I also think people are going to talk all offseason about Tennessee. Shane is just like, oh, how did they replace Dylan Sampson? Yeah. And I wrote about this today. The player that they're going to miss the most is not Sampson. It's Dante Thornton. Dante Thornton led all of American FBS receivers in yards per catch at 25.4 this past year. you go through the games, the losses for Tennessee, guess who's absent? He has like 2 catches in the 3 losses for Tennessee. 0 catches in the Georgia game. 1 catch for 14 yards against Ohio State. He brings you back in the Vanderbilt game. He has 3 catches, 2 touchdowns. Like he had like a souped up Javonte Payton year last year. Dante Thornton was your lone game wrecker. Like you give him the ball, he is going to do something good. He doesn't need a bunch of catches. I would love to have him for 1 more year because at least that gives me somebody else I know on the outside to take some of the pressure off Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley and these super talented young kids. But at least you have one safety valve you know is a chunk play guy. Now you're going to have to bet on Chris Brazzell having that same Dante Thornton year 2 jump. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but the difference when people are comparing the two is that you remember 2 years ago down the stretch, Dante Thornton, what he got hurt on was a touchdown play. Like it was a bomb against Mizzou where he reels it and he had moved to the outside and was showing flashes that he was a lot more comfortable there. Like he was trending up. Chris Brazzell has been trending down basically from the Alabama game on.
Yeah.
Like that, it wasn't like we're going in the offseason. We're like Chris Brazzell. Like I've never been more ready to buy Chris Brazzell stock going in 25. So I don't know. I'm more mixed on whether or not he's going to be able to make.
I was in on the Brad. All I needed was a couple of YouTube clips in spring, and I was. He
hooked. Looks like a great fit. He should be good here. He's huge. He's long. He's 6'5".
Again. I go back to it. It just so many wide receivers in this portal, and it doesn't have to be like the ones. Like I felt
Give
like
me Dan Key. How is Dan Key not a Tennessee Volunteer?
Oh my gosh, I would love Barry and Brown, man, down here. I don't understand how we whiffed on all of that because there was some damn playmakers moving around, and I felt like Tennessee could have been one of those guys that scooped up at least one.
You just needed one
or two, yeah,
and you didn't need an A+. You didn't need to go get a Carnell Tate or a big namer. You needed someone solid, just someone reliable who has an older player, because Chris Brazzell's your only upperclassman at receiver.
What's a kid at Mizzou that went from Mississippi State? You probably got his name.
Oh, Kevin Coleman?
Yeah, I would have loved a Kevin Coleman or something. But we didn't. So we got to pivot. And honestly, I hope that there's just improvement in the quarterback room as well. You know, I'm not saying it was all on Nico, but you know, I felt like there was a little bit of a pullback later in the season, kind of like what you said. Maybe it was the Thornton, situation, or maybe it was just lack of confidence in the other guys. And why wouldn't there be? I mean, there was a lot of times that how many times did you watch a drop and you're just like, golly, if we had somebody just catch the damn ball.
The Kentucky game, he had 4 TDs and 400 yards passing if they don't have 2 key drops. Nimrod had one, and I think Brazzell had the other one in that game. But those were both touchdowns.
Maybe a hard reset's what we needed too. Yeah. So, I them boys better be on the jugs machine like 24/7. That's what I got to say. Because if I see one damn drop, I'm going to lose my I don't know if I'm supposed to cuss on here, but sorry. I get carried away.
I love it. But it also makes it fun because I don't know. Like when I get asked about this, I'm like, I don't know. Like I genuinely have never been more uncertain about what a Tennessee offense is going to look like in the Heupel era than going into this year. You could tell,
It's not. It's not that. It's we know what we want.
Yeah.
We want the 22. We want I feel like Nico's not Hendon Hooker, but he has enough attributes to be as efficient as him. And I think that's the problem is we know what we want now and we're not getting it.
Well, you've seen like the best version, right? Like that's like one of those the scariest part is like, did we see the best version of the Heupel offense already?
Oh, I hope not. I hope we didn't peak. You know what I'm saying?
That's the biggest worry.
Peak
that's
in
what's
high
looming.
School, yeah. Oh God, that sucked. I can't go through another coach search. I can't. And I don't like being too negative because face it, Josh Heupel's a hot name at the end of the year for a reason. There's other teams that would love, and I mean, look at Oklahoma. You got Coach Venables over here with a brand new offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, new quarterback. I mean, they're breaking in everything, and I feel like it's a make or break season. And if that job comes open and we're pissed off at a 9-win season because we didn't make the playoffs, man, don't think that. I'm not saying that would happen, but. Again, I go back to the former days. Don't forget what you got right now because it's been bad. We've had some bad years, man.
Oh, that's very fair. Favorite new Vol to watch next season for you is who? Cousin Shane.
Boo.
Who are you most excited about?
Boo on offense. I want to see
Boo on offense?
Yeah, hell yeah, man. I felt like obviously that was a big reason for him sticking around. You know, you're going to see more of this dual threat, and obviously he's got a lot of speed, and I don't know, man. There's just something about just how tenacious he is on defense. I would imagine that aggressiveness on offense as well. There's no way you're going to get him down on the first hit. He's going to be one of those guys that's just going to scratch, claw, because he's going to prove to you that he belongs on that side of the ball as well. So, yeah, I like seeing little Boo run around.
Let me pose this to you.
And David Sanders, I will say that. I saw him at an On3 event in Nashville, and that's a grown-ass man. That is a big boy. That is I can't believe when I saw him that he's lining up against some poor sucker in high school, and they got to block him, or, it's just is unbelievable how big that guy is, and he's grown since that event. So that's another one. He's not going to get it immediately, but I do think he learns quicker. And these kids are trained different now. It's not like when I was in high school and you have to 2 years develop on the offensive line. You're seeing more and more big boys stepping in and immediately making a difference. So that's another one I'd say I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, it was kind of like when you see, I imagine your experience with Sanders was like how it was for me when I saw Walter Nolan up close at Powell a couple of years ago, where they're lining up at fullback, like on goal line situations. And Walter Nolan's just so much bigger than every other high school kid. It just looks ridiculous. Like he looks ridiculous around all these kids. Like he's just huge.
I saw when I was in high school, Jason Witten.
Oh, yeah.
We did a spring game against him, and back then they had the old shoulder pads that are like them Will Bartholomew's,
Yeah.
And I looked at him. I was like, golly, I hope I ain't blocking his ass. Man.
Well, let me ask you this, Shane, because this is something I've been thinking about this offseason too, and it's something I'm sure the staff has thought about. But Boo, I think you're right on the money in terms of what makes Boo special. And you saw it on punt returns down the stretch last year. Like it was coaching malfeasance that he was not the punt returner from day one, because he almost went for 6 in the Georgia game. The punter, Thorson, was the lone person to stop him. I mean, his first step is so good. He's so hard to tackle. He's got such natural wiggle. He is, he is the best guy to have at the ball. It's kind of like Reggie Bushy a little bit, where the way he moves is just different. Like a lot of these guys do not have that first step. And it makes me wonder, like the star position is important in the Tennessee defense, but is there, because you have so much uncertainty at receiver in 25 and because you really struggled in that room in 24, are we sure he shouldn't just be playing 60 snaps at slot? Like we're overthinking this, and that his best position and more valuable place at Tennessee. Like if you can get Jordan Thomas or Christian Charles and get like B+, B- play at star. Yeah. Would you take that and then maybe A+ slot play of Boo and having someone who can really help Nico for a lot of snaps? Like I've thought a lot about that this offseason, but I don't have a good answer. What about you?
I think you're onto something, and I see it. Not just with Tennessee, but I see it with other schools. I think the problem that you run into with a lot of these kids is they're really good or really bad at practice. And if you're having a bad practice or you're not picking it up, the coaches are a little bit more reluctant to let you try something different, to put more on your plate. And I feel like Boo, especially, if given the opportunity, you want him to do so well that he can't afford to put you back on that side of the football. So that's why I was saying early in the season, if you're doing any of these fantasy football leagues or something like that, that's one I would invest in early, because every touch is going to be special until he either proves that he belongs over there or the coaches find out that, hey, let's just keep the boy on defense. So yeah, I sometimes you're good at practice, sometimes you're bad at practice, but when the lights come on, that's ultimately what matters the most.
I mean, I saw him at Bradley Central before he's just a do-it-all kid. Like he's just a different playmaker.
And I think that's another thing. Even punt returning, when we got the Berry brothers, we've got Cordero Patterson. even though we sucked at football, I almost couldn't wait for them to kick it off to Cordero Patterson just to see if he could return it for a touchdown. I remember that Mississippi State game or the Georgia when he did the reverse. Every time he got the football in his hand, he made something special happen. And I hate that it felt like we wasted him because Cordero Patterson would be great on this Tennessee football team in 25 for sure.
Oh, 100%. He'd be a lot of fun. Which position group are you most confident in next season for Tennessee as it stands right now? Which one are you most confident is going to be a really good unit?
Most confident. It's hard not to say defensive front. But you made mention of the cornerbacks. I feel like the secondary will naturally take a step forward just because the continuity that they have. So the easy answer would be the defense, but I guess the tricky one for me, and maybe it goes along with your article, will be the running backs because I'm not necessarily saying Thornton was better, but I do say this, that the way that Josh Heupel runs this offense, it's almost foolproof for whoever's running the football back there. And I feel like that room will be fine no matter who has the ball.
I am right there with you. In the 4 years of Heupel, Tennessee, I even have this, the clear eyes, full hearts don't lose. Friday Night Lights. Like I had what did I write? I did a spinoff for the Heupel running game version of just basically wide splits, light boxes, run forever. Like that's just kind of what Tennessee football is under Heupel, where I just think the way defenses play them, you're always going to be able to run the ball well. Like so in the 4 years, they're averaging between 4.9 yards or 5.5 yards per carry as a team. There's no drop off. Like it's almost consistent. And I would even argue, we were both in the building for Jalen Wright's big time run to open the Georgia game. Jalen Wright averaged 7.5 yards per attempt 2 years ago. He was more of I think the ultimate Heupel system running back because he actually scared defenses. And what I mean by that is Sampson's best trait was that he was so durable and was so good at just getting you 3 to 4 to 5 and obviously and not breaking down as the game went on. Like Sampson was just third, fourth quarter, this is when I'm more amped up and I'm gonna I don't care, you can try and take me down, I'm getting 6 yards out of this. But you didn't worry about Sampson breaking 1 for 80. Jalen Wright legitimately scared you. Jalen Wright had track speed. Jalen Wright was so good when he got to that second level that it scared opposing defenses. And I think he's been the best upside back of anyone in the Heupel era. But I just think Peyton Lewis, they're going to be back to the rotation this year. Peyton Lewis, Star Thomas, and why am I blanking? Deshaun Bishop, they're going to be fine. It's not going to be as, I guess, fun because you're not going to have a 22 touchdown, 1,500 yard tailback, which is, it's really fun when you have that kind of back. But it's also Tennessee's best season was a trio of Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson, and Jalen Wright in 22, and they were just fine. And it's okay.
It felt kind of like the Mike Leach quarterback situation. No matter who he has back there, statistically, is going to lead the country in something. So I feel like in this Josh Heupel era, you're always going to have 1 or 2 running backs toward the top of the SEC, especially in yards per carry, because there's a lot of openings up front.
Oh, I'm right there with you. Final thing here, Shane. Way too early game that you are most curious about. Which one have you already circled that you're just, when you're looking at the schedule right now, what are you most curious about for Tennessee in 25?
Well, this sounds stupid, but I'm old. 1998 started with one particular football team.
Syracuse.
That's right. And a lot of people forgot Donovan McNabb and how that one came down to the wire. And we almost lost that football game. If we did, we never would have went to a BCS championship game. So the Syracuse one, I think, will be a good test. This is a really good coached football team. I do not think that Tennessee will be underdogs, but I do think that it will give us, and maybe it's just the homer in me, can't wait for the first game of the year type situation. So if I'm not looking at that one, I'm looking at the Florida Gator game later in the year, because I do think the Florida Gators have improved. I think they'll have a better football team. It'll be at the Swamp. And like you, I feel like that could be the game that decides if they go to the big dance or not.
And I think that helps Tennessee because I think that kind of pressure of they really learn from the South Carolina just bomb that we'll never have a good answer on what happened there with Jeremy Banks and everything. Like we'll never know for sure what happened.
We know.
Well,
we know.
I'm just saying in terms of like the implosion defensively, everything where it's just like, even without Jeremy Banks, like that kind of implosion just cannot happen in that spot. Where it's just touchdown after touchdown after touch. And you're just like, we're not getting a stop here. This game's over. And I just look at where they were last year. Cause that Vanderbilt game, I don't know how you felt. When Vanderbilt goes up 14-0, that opening kick six where I remember I was traveling back from Thanksgiving back to Atlanta, and my wife's like trying to sleep in the passenger seat because we had really bad traffic on the way up. So like I thought I timed it right just to get right back in front of the TV when kickoff started, and traffic. So I'm like having to listen on the radio to Hubs and Kesley and Company, and I'm like, I got the phone like next to me and seeing some like update, and I'm like losing my mind. And I was like, what's happening? And she's like, aren't we playing Vanderbilt? And it's like one of those where I'm like, this is my heart was just racing because it was bad, where I was like, they're not going to do this again. They cannot do this 2 out of the last 3 years. You cannot lay this at, because Vanderbilt will never let Tennessee live this down. If they had not recovered, and that was all Dante Thornton, who got that thing with the 86-yard touchdown reception where he gets them back in the game. Yeah, that would have been. I wonder where we're at if Tennessee doesn't just bounce back and then proceed to take the first couple big hits from Vanderbilt and get that game back on track. But I say that all I bring that all back to say, I think Florida will be the same situation, where I think Tennessee will at worst have 2 losses, and they know going into year 5 here and everything else, like they will be in the college football playoff if they just simply win this game in November, and you're in. And I think Tennessee has handled that a lot better this past year, and I think this is a very well-coached football team now. I think they've learned, they've gone through a lot of those early growing pains with success. I think they handle success a lot better than they did in 2022. So I'd feel better about it. And also just, hey, Tennessee won in the Swamp in December 1st in early 2000. So that was the last time, or one more time since then. What was it? Was it 2003? What was the last time
that we won down there?
Yeah, would it be 2003?
Shit, it's been a while, brother. I think I would go back to that. What was that year Dobbs was down there and we had it 4th and whatever, and Callaway goes down the sideline. You know, was it Callaway? Maybe I remember which.
I think it was Callaway.
Yeah, that
it was 2003 was the last time we won in Gainesville.
So you think about all the times you should have won, and we should have won 2 years ago. I mean, it was a joke that we didn't. That's why I made the bet on our show that if Florida won, I'd do a mile for every point they beat us by, and they beat us by 13 damn points. And it was almost more than that. I was at the end, even though it was a moot point, I was ready for him just to kick field goal, knock 3 miles off my walk the next day. But yeah, that's it stuck with me. And after that, brother, I am not betting on that football game, especially down in the Swamp. But this is a year. And what's intriguing about that one is it's late. We're so used to playing that one early, having it late in the year. I don't think it's been this late since 2001 when we went down there. And that was a great game. But I do think that this is a good opportunity, and the wheels may be coming off for Florida. I feel like the Boo Birds will be out, especially if they've got a tough schedule. And if they lose 3 or 4 games before ours, there may be, we may be talking coach swaps down there. And I think that's exactly what Tennessee would need.
100%. And I even said, I was like, Graham Mertz scares me more than TJ Lagway against Tennessee. Those kind of quarterbacks crush Tennessee in the bank style. It's the Will Howards, the Graham Mertz, the ones who can just sit there and they're like, we're attacking you 5-yard wheel routes, 5-yard outs, and we're just going to stab you in these very little bits at a time. And you're like, we can't get off the field. It's those kind of games where the Arkansas game was one of the most agonizing, frustrating, that opening, like that's what that is. That was the special. Like that's how you do it. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, to Tennessee's credit, but when it does, like it's the grammar where people are like, oh, Lagway, if he had a full game, I'm like, Tennessee's beating, I think, Florida more comfortably if Lagway plays the full game, because I think Graham Mertz was cooking. Graham Mertz was comfortable.
Graham Mertz would have won that game. I believe it. And
Oof.
and DJ, I mean, DJ at the end of the season was obviously a lot different than he was at the start of the season, but he's a really good kid, and they've got a lot of talent in that wide receiver room. And that was just it's a sneaky good team. So it's one of those that I do think momentum is going to be important. They're either on the good side or the bad side. And not a lot of Florida listeners on this podcast, so I'll just tell you, I'm thinking it's the bad side. This may be a team that struggles to get 7 wins.
But I'm here for it because I think they're going to be.
Hell yeah!
I love the Florida Auburn developments this year is must see. I'm so glad I'm not a fan of either of those two teams because it's all or nothing. I mean, Napier and Freeze, it's all or nothing this year. They so big in the portal. They have all this offseason hype. And then you look at the schedule and you're like, oh, Jackson Arnold's under. You're basing it all on Jackson Arnold. You were there when Tennessee's the reason Jackson Arnold was not a starter for the rest of the season. Like that was what Tennessee did in that game to Jackson Arnold imploded under pressure.
Yeah,
from
I
UT.
was at the Missouri-Oklahoma game when he basically gift wrapped him a score there at the end.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued. That's going to be a team that looks totally different next year. I think LSU's another team. It's going to look totally different next season. And I think some are going to be good, and I think some are going to take like the hot one right now is Oklahoma with Mateer and bringing him in, extremely mobile quarterback. And I think he could be a good thing, but again, you're replacing coordinators. Your offensive line still looks like garbage. So I'm glad Tennessee's got them pretty early because I do think that, and at home, that's also going to help. So yeah, I love our schedule. I think Tennessee's teed up very nicely. And if they're not talking about us now, by God, they will in November.
They're just such a safer bet than so many other teams that people are talking into, but they just don't want to do it. I'm like, Tennessee's lost 1 home game in 3 years.
Yeah.
They're a safe bet.
It was the one I was at. So
same.
The game I went to the last time before that was the Ole Miss Tennessee game where
all right, you can't be going any more games.
No,
Shane. Sorry,
you're
out.
I'm done. I almost feel like it's not good, but I do want to see another Tennessee game because I do love getting over there. But yeah, we're going to try to do a couple more games this year. And I haven't quite narrowed it down. We did South Carolina, LSU, Missouri, Oklahoma. But this year I would love to see Tennessee, Georgia again, but I don't know. I'm bad luck, so maybe I don't go. Dolly Parton couldn't even sing in that game I was at. That's how bad it was.
That's an all-timer. That's a great, like, you had to be there situation. You had to be there because I don't think on the broadcast I watched it back. Like you have no idea what that was like unless you were in the building.
It's a shit show. Absolute shit show, man. Yeah, somebody got fired. Somebody got fired after that one.
Cousin Shane, what can the good folks check out from you and Mike over there at that SEC podcast this week?
Yeah, so we're working on a few things. Big Cuz Does is something we've been rolling out. I went to Universal Park, did a couple of drinks around the Universal, so be sure to check out that on YouTube. But me and Mike, we're there every day, usually about 7 o'clock, just talking all things SEC football. Dabble a little bit in basketball, but not enough to know anything. But appreciate all the support we get over there, and thank you for having me on, Chase.
Absolutely. Keep up the great work, my friend. I love the Rusty Manziel one you did a couple days ago. Yeah. That was a really good interview. So y'all are doing more and more good stuff content-wise, and it's a must-watch each and every day. So SEC fans, Tennessee fans who are tuning into this one, make sure you're subscribed to that SEC podcast if you are not already. Cousin Shane, we'll have to do this again soon.
Hell yeah, man. Anytime, brother.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.